She blocked firefighters at the gate, not knowing her own home was burning down. The fire truck came flying down the road, sirens screaming, lights flashing so bright it lit up the trees. It was just getting dark, and smoke was already curling, up into the sky like a warning. You could smell it before you saw it. Burning plastic, something electric, and something worse. The crew knew it was serious. Every second mattered. But just as the truck reached the front gate of the Cedar Hollow neighborhood, they slammed the brakes. There she was. Janet, arms crossed, feet planted, not moving. She was dressed like she just stepped out for a jog, blue-green workout suit, perfect ponytail, but she looked like a wall. The kind of wall no one wanted to deal with, especially not in an emergency. "This is private property," she said before anyone even got out of the truck. "You can't come in without HOA clearance." The firefighters were stunned. Captain Daniels, a seasoned man with ash-streaked hands and tired eyes, stepped out and held up his badge. "Ma'am, there's a fire in this neighborhood. We need to get through. Move the car." Janet didn't even flinch. "Sirens are too loud," she snapped. "People live here. You didn't schedule anything with me or the HOA." Daniels looked around. His team was already stepping off the truck, ready to move. One of the younger firefighters, Alex, looked up at the smoke drifting higher. It was getting darker. He could feel it in the air. The urgency, the heat. "We don't need to schedule a fire," Daniels said. "Get out of the way." But Janet just shook her head like they were asking to borrow her garden hose instead of trying to stop a possible disaster. Her white SUV was parked right across the only clear path into the neighborhood, like a gate that refused to open. "I said no," she said. "We have rules for a reason." The wind changed then, just for a second. And that's when they saw it. Smoke curling from one of the rooftops, not just a little. It was thick and moving fast, not from far away, maybe 2 or 3 houses down. Still, Janet didn't move. I was nearby in my ambulance truck checking oxygen tanks when I heard the call come through the radio. Electrical fire, Cedar Hollow, heavy smoke, possible spread. I knew that place too well. Rows of perfect houses, twisty roads, and one big rule. Everything went through Janet. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was the queen of the HOA. People joked you could get fined for smiling too loudly on her street. When I pulled up behind the fire truck, I saw her standing there like she owned the world. Her clipboard was tucked under one arm, and her tone was sharp like she was giving out parking tickets instead of blocking emergency help. "You're not authorized," she said again. "We've had problems with strangers before." The crew was restless. Alex looked like he wanted to scream. Another firefighter tried talking to her, but she just got louder. "No permission. No entry." 3 minutes passed like that. 3 long, slow minutes where no one could do anything except argue. And in fire time, 3 minutes is everything. A small flame can eat through a whole room in that time. A house can go from smoky to unlivable. Someone can die. Still, she didn't budge. Daniels ordered the truck to back up and take the long route in. That meant winding around 2 blocks and coming in from the side. But as they turned the corner, Janet raced ahead in her SUV and parked it again. This time, right over the nearest fire hydrant. You could see it in Alex's eyes. He couldn't believe it. None of us could. "I don't trust strangers using our water," Janet said. "It's not free." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a problem. It was danger, wrapped in control and covered in rules. Daniels shouted, "Jump over it!" And Alex did, literally leaping over the hood to hook up the hose. A plastic bird decoration got knocked over in the process. Janet screamed louder about that than the fire. "That bird is special to my family." Nobody cared. Not anymore. We had a job to do. As I started prepping my equipment, I sent up my drone, just to get a look at what we were really dealing with. The footage made my stomach twist. The smoke wasn't just nearby. It was Janet's house. Thick, black smoke was pouring out of her air vents. The back window glowed like a campfire. Her chimney looked like a train engine. I radioed Daniels. "The fire. It's in Janet's basement." There was silence on the line. Janet didn't move. Not yet. But in her eyes, you could see it. Confusion. Fear. She had no idea she was standing in the way of her own rescue. People in Cedar Hollow had gotten used to walking on eggshells. The sidewalks were clean, the lawns were trimmed like a golf course, and the trash bins all had to face the same way on pickup day. If you forgot, even once, you'd find a warning slip taped to your door. It didn't come from the city. It came from Janet. She ran the HOA like a tiny kingdom, and she wore that power like a crown. Her clipboard was always nearby, like a badge of authority. She once fined a family for painting their shutters too cheerful, a shade of yellow. Another time, she told a woman to remove a potted plant because it was visually aggressive. And that kid who drew chalk hopscotch on the sidewalk? Janet called it graffiti. To her, rules were safety, control. Everything had a place. People who didn't follow the guidelines were threats to the community's image. Most residents stayed quiet to avoid her wrath, though some kept quiet just to stay out of her growing list of targets. So, when the firefighters arrived and she blocked them, it wasn't totally shocking. But it was the first time her rules had real consequences. And still, even as smoke came from her own roof, Janet couldn't see past her belief that control meant everything. "You don't know what kind of things go missing when outsiders come in," she told Daniels, trying to sound calm, but her voice was tight. "We had a toolbox stolen once." Daniels didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the chimney. The smoke had turned darker, thicker. That was a bad sign. He nodded at Alex, and the team started moving fast. They had to. Janet finally stepped back, not to help, but to yell at them for stepping on her grass. I got out of my truck and joined the crew. I had my thermal scanner and a medical kit, but more than that, I had questions. How could someone be so stuck in their own rules that they'd risk their own home? Their life? Janet paced near the front porch like someone waiting for a package, muttering to herself, "I just had the rugs cleaned. This better not ruin the carpet." Alex and Daniels got the front door open, and the wave of heat hit all of us like an eye. Oven door. The smoke came pouring out. Inside, things didn't look right. There were little porcelain owls and fake flowers on every shelf, like a gift shop exploded. Everything was too clean, too staged. You could feel it, the need for control in every inch of the house. But downstairs, the basement told a different story. It was hot, too hot. Alex moved fast, pointing out the flickers of flame coming from behind a weird curtain. We pushed it aside to find wires, lots of them. Batteries stacked beside heating lamps, a humidifier duct taped to the wall, and a strange, humming box sitting near a pile of old towels. "What is this?" I asked out loud. Janet's voice came from behind us. "It's my relaxation zone. I ordered a special heater from Texas. It's eco-friendly." "Eco-friendly?" Daniels muttered. "It's a fire waiting to happen." Janet didn't like that. She marched into the basement in her spotless white shoes and tried to unplug something while shouting, "You people always overreact. This is my home. I have rights." Alex gently pushed her back, but she stumbled over a rug shaped like a fox and landed with a thud. "I'll be bruised," she snapped. We didn't have time to argue. The wires were melting. The flames were spreading. Daniels ordered foam sprayed fast. Alex found the source, 2 oversized car batteries connected to a sketchy converter and wrapped in cloth bags. "I think someone tried to build a homemade spa," he said, "with parts from a junkyard." I started taking photos. This wasn't just carelessness. It was dangerous. If we'd been a few minutes later, the whole house could have gone up. As the foam filled the basement, Janet stood up slowly, her arms crossed again, but her face pale now. Ash clung to her jacket. Her bird statue outside was knocked over and soaked. Her welcome mat, which read, "Bless this home," was buried under slushy puddles of foam and grime. She didn't yell anymore. Not yet. Outside, neighbors had gathered. Quiet. At first, then whispering, then filming. Cedar Hollow didn't usually get scenes like this. Most excitement came from bake sales or over-decorated mailboxes. But now, people watched Janet's perfect life melt away in real time. One man leaned over to someone else and said, "She gave me a ticket for having too many garden gnomes." The other replied, "She told my wife her tulips were too colorful." And now here she was, staring at her own house, smoke still drifting from the broken windows. She looked like she wanted to say something clever, something in control. But for the first time, she had nothing to say. Just silence. And behind her, the fire crew moved deeper into the house. What they found next would change everything. The smoke had gotten worse. You could barely see the tops of the houses anymore, and the air had that heavy, sharp taste that clings to your throat. Janet stood outside her house now, staring at the mess, but still not connecting the dots. Her expression wasn't fear exactly. It was disbelief, like the world was misbehaving and refusing to follow her carefully made rules. I stepped away from the crew for a second and launched my drone. I'd brought it out of habit. It started as a hobby, flying over fields and empty roads to pass time between calls. But lately, I'd started using it to help spot fires before. They spread. I sent it up and watched the screen as it flew higher and hovered over Cedar Hollow. The neighborhood was laid out like a perfect grid. Every house matched. Every lawn was neat. But only one had thick black smoke pouring out of the vents rising in steady clouds. And that house was Janet's. Not a neighbor. Not down the street. Not across the block. Her house. I zoomed in. The back window was glowing orange like someone had lit a giant candle inside. The smoke was coming out of the chimney in thick, fast puffs. Too much, too dark, too dangerous. I grabbed my radio. Daniel's, it's hers. The fire's in Janet's. House? Basement? Maybe deeper. For a moment, no one said anything. Even the firefighters paused. One of them turned slowly to look at Janet. I watched her face as she heard me say it again. "The fire's coming from your house." She blinked. Once, twice. Then shook her head, like I had just told her the moon had fallen. "No," she said. "That's not possible. I just had my bathroom redone. My appliances are all new." Daniel stepped toward her. "We saw the flames. We're going in." Janet stepped back onto her porch, shaking her head. "This has to be some mistake. I keep everything clean. I even use those special plugs for energy safety." But nobody was listening to her anymore. Not even the neighbors. Everyone was watching the firefighters rush inside. People were pulling out their phones now, recording from across the street. A few whispered to each other. Some were smirking. Others looked genuinely shocked. For so long, Janet had seemed untouchable, like she was carved from concrete and coated in rules, and now her house was on fire. Inside, Alex and Daniels found more trouble. Janet had turned her basement into something strange, something that didn't belong in a regular home. There were heating units wired into the wall, duct-taped connections, and multiple cords running under rugs. A weird humming came from a metal box plugged into a stack of car batteries. Daniels touched one of the walls and felt the heat through the drywall. The whole place was ready to burst if they hadn't arrived when they did. Janet pushed her way inside, coughing from the smoke. "Be careful with the floors," she yelled. "That's vintage hardwood." She pointed to the ceramic, animals lined along her staircase. "Don't knock those over. They're part of my seasonal display." Nobody responded. We were all too busy making sure the house didn't explode. She grabbed my arm suddenly and said, It's just my spa room. I got a deal on the heater. It's from Serenity Systems. Very eco-forward. I looked at her like she'd just confessed to building a bomb out of yoga mats. You installed this yourself? Well, I had someone help. Vance or Vinny. He was very professional. Wore a hat. Said he knew wiring. She was talking faster now, like speeding up would somehow undo. The damage. Daniels shouted from the other room. Found the source. 2 batteries and a homemade converter. This is illegal setup stuff. I looked again at the cords. They were frayed, melted in places, sitting way too close to piles of old towels and bags labeled relaxation sand. Janet tried to walk over to the setup, but she slipped on a damp spot and nearly went down again. You people have no respect, she snapped. But her voice was changing. Cracks were forming. You could hear it. For the first time, Janet didn't sound in charge. Outside, the smoke had started to clear, but the neighborhood was gathering. People were watching through fences and bushes. Some were whispering into their phones, probably telling the story before it even ended. One man had set up a folding chair on his lawn like he was watching a parade. Janet's carefully crafted image was falling apart in real time. Her hair was frizzed, her outfit was smeared with ash, and behind her, her spotless world was now soaked with foam and littered with scorched wires. I watched her stand in front of her porch, arms still crossed, but her hands shaking. Her mouth opened like she was about to give another speech about community values. But no words came out. For someone who always had something to say, that silence spoke louder than anything. And still, we hadn't found everything yet. Inside the house, the smoke clung to the walls like it was trying to stay. You could smell burning wires and melted plastic even after the foam had settled. The heat had dropped, but the danger hadn't left. You could feel it in your chest, like the building itself still held its breath. Daniels was crouched near the strange box that had been sparking earlier. It looked homemade, like something pulled out of a garage sale and wired together by someone, with more confidence than skill. One of the battery packs had cracked from the heat. The insulation around the cords had bubbled and split. It wasn't just a bad setup. It was a fire trap disguised as some kind of do-it-yourself spa. Alex shined a light toward the corner, and I followed the beam with my eyes. More wires, more batteries. Some were stacked on top of old cardboard boxes. Someone had even stuffed an extension cord behind a water heater and taped it to the wall with painter's tape. Nearby, a bundle of dusty towels had caught some of the sparks. It looked like someone tried to build a homemade retreat using parts that didn't belong in a home. We weren't dealing with a fire caused by bad luck or a random spark. This was carelessness. This was a bad idea gone worse. Why would anyone build this in a basement? Alex whispered to me, half in disbelief. I didn't have an answer. Janet stood on the stairs above us, gripping the railing tightly. Her knuckles were white. Her voice had gone quiet, almost like she was talking to herself. I just wanted a space to unwind. I read reviews. It was supposed to be low energy, low risk. The website said it was award-winning. Daniels raised an eyebrow and said, "What website?" Maybe Serenity Systems. Or Serenity Solutions? I don't know. It was on Etsy. I paid through PayPal. The guy had a beard. Nobody responded. The quiet between us was heavier than the smoke. We continued sweeping the area and found something even stranger. Air ducts that had been shifted around and sealed with regular packing tape. Not HVAC tape, not anything approved for safety, just clear plastic tape like someone was mailing a box. One of the ducts ran directly into a narrow space behind a curtain. Daniels peeled it back. There was a hidden door. We looked at each other. Not part of any blueprint I'd seen. He opened it. Behind it was a small room, tight, unfinished. More wires ran along the floor like vines. A few solar power kits leaned against the wall, still in their boxes. 2 more large batteries sat beside. An outlet that had clearly overheated. The outlet cover had melted, warping into the drywall. Black soot stretched above it like a claw mark. Janet started stepping down the stairs again. "It's just a moisture remover backup," she insisted. "Earth-friendly. You wouldn't understand. It's part of my wellness routine." Daniels turned slowly to look at her. "Ma'am, this breaks half the codes in the book. I took a few photos. I didn't want to, but I knew we'd need them. This wasn't just a story for the fire report. This was something deeper." From upstairs, a loud voice called out, "Hey!" It was one of the inspectors who'd just arrived. "You're going to want to see this!" We all went up. Janet followed us, brushing ash off her sleeves like she was late for an appointment and just mildly annoyed. The inspector, Ryan, stood in her utility closet with a flashlight. Inside were burned electrical outlets, scorched wires, and several unlabeled plastic containers with black residue inside. The entire back wall had been damaged, and someone had tried to cover it up, with painted cardboard cutouts and decorative fabric. "I thought this was a display," Ryan said. "It's actually a fire hazard covered in wallpaper." Janet looked at the mess, then back at us, eyes wide, voice sharp. "Okay, maybe I didn't hire the best handyman, but I'm a victim, here too. You can't blame me for what he did." Daniels turned to her. "Did you even get a permit for any of this?" Janet scoffed. "Permits are for people who don't trust themselves. I'm very thorough. That's when it really hit me." Janet didn't think she was wrong. She didn't even see this as dangerous. To her, this was just another rule she had decided didn't apply. The same way she handed out made-up tickets to neighbors and told people what kind of flowers to plant. She was so deep into her world of control and made-up authority that reality had become optional. Outside, the neighbors had moved closer. The fire was under control, but the gossip wasn't. People whispered, shook their heads. A few even laughed under their breath. The woman who fined others for leaving out Halloween decorations one day too long now had her laundry room glowing, like a bonfire. Then Janet did something none of us expected. She walked toward Daniels, reached for his phone, and smacked it out of his hand. The phone hit the floor, the screen cracked. Everyone froze. Alex stepped forward instantly. "What was that?" Janet snapped. "You don't record people without permission. This is still my home." Daniels just looked at her. Not angry, not shocked, just tired. "You just interfered with official documentation. That's obstruction." Janet opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Then, without warning, she turned and rushed up. The stairs, fast, frantic, and we heard the sound of furniture scraping against the floor. She was blocking the door. She'd just trapped us in her burning basement. Ryan tried the knob. "It's locked." She put something against it. Alex moved fast, rushing to the garage to find another way out. Daniels shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable." We weren't just cleaning up a fire anymore. We were cleaning up a life built on control, now falling apart piece by piece. The basement was hot again. Not fire hot, but thick with leftover heat that clung to the walls. My shirt was sticking to my back, and the air tasted like battery acid and dust. But that wasn't what made it hard to breathe. We were locked in. Janet had shoved a bookcase against the basement door from the other side. We heard the loud thump as she pushed it, followed by her footsteps pacing upstairs. Daniels jiggled the knob, gave the door a shove, but it barely moved. "You've got to be kidding me," he said under his breath. "She just locked us inside. Her house during an active investigation," Ryan muttered, trying to radio dispatch. "That's a charge." Alex's voice crackled through the radio. He was on the outside now, trying to get in through the garage. "Give me 5 minutes. I'll loop around." Daniels didn't look worried, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from dealing with people who think rules are tools, not responsibilities. He sat down on a crate and sighed. Meanwhile, Janet's voice floated down from the floor above. I'm calling the mayor. I have friends. I'm not the villain here. You people don't respect boundaries. It was like she had created her own world, one where being in control meant she could bend reality to fit her version of it. She still didn't get it. Her house had almost gone up in flames because of her, and she was blaming us for stepping. On the rug, Ryan pointed toward the far corner of the basement. "There's something else here," he said. We walked over and found a row of file cabinets, locked, dusty, but clearly used recently. Beside them was a whiteboard with names written in red marker. A list. Next to each name were notes. 2. Loud, illegal plants, ignored HOA notice, and next to mine, 2 involved with outside emergency services. Daniels let out a low whistle. She had files on the residents. Looks like she was keeping tabs on everybody, Ryan added. Some of these are time-stamped photos. Nighttime. That's creepy. Alex finally forced open the basement door from the garage entrance. Light poured in as he stepped through, wiping sweat from his forehead. She's not upstairs anymore. Doors wide open. I think she's hiding. We made our way back up. The main level was quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that meant something was about to snap. Outside, a group of neighbors had gathered in the street. More than just a few curious people. Half the block, maybe more. One man was holding a folding chair. Another had brought popcorn. Someone had gone live on social media. The word had spread. Janet's house was the fire. Janet blocked the firefighters. Janet might be going to jail. Then came the sheriff. Not because of the fire, because we had called in a report about obstruction and interference. A uniformed deputy walked up the driveway as calm as a summer breeze. He knocked once, then stepped inside. Janet appeared from around the kitchen corner, holding a ceramic teapot like it was a weapon of peace. "Let's not make this a scene," she said, smiling like someone who practiced her expressions in the mirror. "I just need a chance to explain. Maybe over some calming tea?" Daniels stared at her. "You locked 3 emergency responders in your basement." "I was overwhelmed," she said quickly. "It was a reaction, a stress response." Then she tried something none of us saw coming. She grabbed the folder out of Ryan's hands and made a run for the back door. We all froze for half a second. Then Alex ran. She didn't get far. She tripped trying to climb out the back window, landing in her rose bushes with her shoes kicked off and her fancy teacup shattered on the grass. Alex retrieved the folder and helped the officer lift her to her feet. She kept talking, her voice high-pitched now. "You're all going to regret this. I am the HOA." The neighbors nearby had stopped whispering. Now they were clapping, slow. Sarcastic claps like a bad ending to a play they'd all been forced to watch for too long. One man shouted, "Tell that to the fire hydrant." Janet's hands were cuffed behind her back, and her voice went from angry to desperate. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. That equipment was for wellness. It was safe. My technician wore a badge." "Who was your technician?" Ryan asked. "His name was, Vance? Or maybe Vinny? He wore a cool hat." That was her defense. As the sheriff led her to the squad car, Daniels and I walked through the wreckage. Foam and ash on the carpet. Broken decorations. The bird statue was lying face down in the mud. The welcome mat was soaked through and unreadable. It used to say, "Peace lives here." Now it looked like the opposite of peace had exploded inside. In her office, we found more. Invoices paid to companies that didn't exist. Checks signed. To herself, using different business names. Earth Harmony Services. JL Solutions. Tranquil Tech. Some were just scribbled PayPal receipts with no services listed. Ryan looked through them and shook his head. She was either stealing HOA funds or running a hobby empire of nonsense. As the sheriff's car pulled away with Janet inside, a small cheer rose from the street. People were filming, yes, but they were also smiling. For the first time in a long time, People weren't afraid to be seen outside their houses. They were talking freely, laughing. Some of them looked relieved in a way that only comes after escaping something invisible but heavy. One of the board members, an older woman with short gray hair and a voice full of steady reason, pulled me aside and said, "This isn't Janet's first disaster. 2 years ago, she installed chicken coop heaters in the clubhouse attic to dry pool towels. Fried the whole building's power. We were too scared to speak up." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Because she controlled the gate codes, the mail system, the neighborhood app." We looked at each other, the truth sitting between us now like smoke after a fire. "But not anymore," she said, and for the first time, I believed her. The sun was starting to go down, but no one in Cedar Hollow was heading inside. The fire was out, yes, but something else was burning now, a kind of shared relief and curiosity. Janet was gone. In the back of a sheriff's car, probably still, trying to call someone important to fix things. Her phone had been taken, her shoes left behind in the rose bushes, and her perfect white fence had foam drying on it like whipped cream after a storm. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood was breathing. More neighbors came out. They weren't hiding behind hedges or blinds anymore. They stood in groups, talking, laughing in disbelief, showing each other the videos they had taken. Janet, the same woman who once gave a teenager a fine for putting a hammock between 2 trees, had become a national joke in less than an hour. The videos were already online. Someone had titled it, "Karen Sets Fire to Her Own Rules." Inside, Janet's house, we kept searching. Daniels and Ryan opened drawers, closets, cabinets, anything that looked out of place, and there were plenty. It was like her need for control wasn't just outside her home. It lived in every corner. There were folders labeled compliance infractions, with photos of residents' backyards taken from odd angles, probably zoomed in with her phone. Notes scribbled in red ink. Too many flamingos. Unauthorized. Flower color. Back gate left open for 11 minutes. It was more than strange. It was obsessive. Ryan found a locked drawer in her desk and opened it with a thin crowbar he carried for safety checks. Inside were more receipts, pages and pages of them. Payments made from the HOA account to companies that had no address. One was JARS Consulting, another was Serenity Environmental Wellness, and several were just initials, JL Solutions, Cedar Care LLC, all with Janet's name somewhere in the signature. Daniels frowned. She was paying herself? Ryan nodded. Slowly. Or someone she made up. Either way, it's embezzlement if those funds were HOA money. Evelyn, the temporary board member who had been helping quietly behind the scenes, came in and saw the mess. She didn't even look surprised. "I told people," she said. No one listened. She scared them into silence. We handed her a file full of fraudulent payments. Her hands shook a little as she looked at it. "Flowers that were too bright," she whispered. "That's what she fined me for last year, because they clashed with the seasonal theme." And then, Evelyn said something I'll never forget. "We thought she was protecting the neighborhood. Turns out she was protecting her own little kingdom." Downstairs, in a closet behind the utility sink, we found more. Electrical boxes that were melted, wires dangling where outlets had once been. No permits, no inspections. It looked like a science fair project gone wrong. A fire waiting to happen, and it finally had. Alex walked in from outside, holding something carefully in his arms. It was the bird statue, soaked, cracked, and covered in foam, but still recognizable. The same bird Janet had screamed about when it got knocked over during the emergency. He set it down on the table next to a burned extension cord and said, "She blocked the fire crew for this." Outside, the street had turned into something like a block party, only with ash still settling in the air. Someone brought out folding tables. A few parents let their kids run free without worrying about sidewalk violations. People were smiling, not just because Janet was gone, but because fear was gone. Evelyn stood on Janet's porch and cleared her throat. No mic, just her voice. I know we're all in shock, she said, but we have to move forward. This neighborhood was never meant to be ruled by fear. No more fake tickets, no more secret fines, no more spying. We're going to rebuild, and not just the house, the trust, too. Someone started clapping, then more joined, and for the first time in a long time, it felt honest. Alex leaned toward me and whispered. She turned HOA into her own private police. Now she's the one. In custody. Think she'll come back? I asked. He shrugged. If she does, she won't have a gate code. We all laughed a little. Later that evening, the news crews showed up. The big vans with satellite dishes, microphones, cameras, bright lights. Janet's story had spread fast, faster than the fire itself. One of the firefighters from another district leaned over and said, "That's the woman who blocked a crew in Brookside 3 years ago. Same look, different town. They never got her name right. She keeps changing it. And just like that, it made sense. Janet wasn't just a control freak. She was a pattern, a person who moved from place to place, enforcing her own made-up laws, until things exploded, literally this time." The next morning, someone put a for sale sign in Janet's yard. We still don't know if it was real or a joke. Under it, someone planted the burned bird statue in the grass, like a tiny, silent monument. And next to it, a new wooden sign appeared. Welcome to Cedar Hollow, home of firefighters, freedom, and birds. Janet's house was still standing, but it had scars now. Scorched siding, broken windows, and a story written into every piece of burnt furniture and melted plastic. She tried to build a kingdom out of rules and control, but in the end, her own fire brought it down. And the people she once tried to control? They were finally free. Next morning, Cedar Hollow felt different. Not quieter, just lighter. The kind of silence that settles after a long storm. Neighbors were out early, walking their dogs without looking over their shoulders, watering their plants without worrying. If they were using the approved garden hose color. You could almost hear the neighborhood exhale. Janet's house still stood at the end of the street like a monument to everything that went wrong. Black marks around the windows, foam-stained bricks, a patchy lawn full of footprints, hoses, and reminders. But the inside? That was where the real damage had happened. The fire department had sealed off parts of the basement. Inspector Ryan came back with a crew, not to fight fire this time, but to handle evidence. What they found would be part of a formal investigation: misused HOA funds, illegal wiring, safety violations, and a locked filing cabinet full of behavioral records on almost every resident in the community. Janet had built a paper prison of fake fines and threats, and now it was all out in the open. Evelyn, the calm and thoughtful board member, stepped in as acting HOA president. Her first move wasn't just about rules, it was about healing. She called an emergency community meeting, but unlike the usual ones with 5 empty chairs and half-hearted attendance, this one was packed. Even the people who normally avoided HOA stuff were there, some with folding chairs, some just standing. In the back, arms crossed, waiting to see what would happen now. Evelyn stood in front of everyone holding Janet's clipboard. But instead of using it, she dropped it in a cardboard box beside the table. "We're not using fear anymore," she said. "No more fake rules. No more fines for sidewalk chalk. This is going to be a community again, not a kingdom." The crowd clapped, not politely. Loudly, she continued. "If you were unfairly fined, bring me your tickets. We're going to refund every dollar we can. And if you were scared to speak before, I want to hear your voice now." One by one, residents started to speak up. A retired couple talked about getting fined for flying a small flag in their yard. A mom said she'd been warned twice for letting her kid sell lemonade without HOA-approved signage. Another woman quietly admitted she'd been too scared to plant flowers outside her fence because Janet said they were disruptive to the uniform look. It was like the floodgates opened. But instead of water, it was truth, piling out into the open, finally. Free. Then someone shared something that stunned us all. A young man named Raphael stood up and said, "My sister uses a wheelchair." We asked Janet to let us build a small ramp to the front door. She denied the request, said it didn't fit the community aesthetic. The room fell silent. She said we could carry her up the steps, Raphael added. Nobody had known, but now everyone did. And no one was willing to let that kind of power control Cedar Hollow ever again. Back at Janet's house, police escorted a few officials in and out, carrying boxes of documents and electronics. Her name, it turned out, wasn't new to them. She had changed her last name multiple times, lived in at least 3 different communities over the past 6 years. Each time she joined the HOA. Each time, things got out of hand. But she'd always left before the truth caught up. Not this time. The local news station ran the headline that evening: HOA president arrested after blocking firefighters from her own burning home. It went viral. Photos of Janet in her ash-covered jogging outfit flooded social media. Memes popped up with captions like, "Let me speak to your firefighter," and "Rules are rules, except for fire." The HOA officially voted her out. Her access to community funds was revoked, passwords changed, keys collected, mailbox locks replaced. The house would likely face insurance battles for months. And the legal system would now be dealing with what we'd all been living through. The neighborhood didn't just move on, it moved forward. At the end of the week, a block party was held, not fancy. Just neighbors, food trucks, and kids running wild with chalk and bubbles. No one handed out tickets. No one measured the height of decorations. People smiled at each other like they were finally seeing their neighbors for who they were, not who they were allowed to be. Alex brought the burned bird decoration. He'd cleaned it up, glued it back together the best he could. He set it under the new sign at the neighborhood entrance, the one that now read, "Welcome to Cedar Hollow, home of firefighters, freedom, and birds." It was funny and meaningful. A reminder. That burned bird statue used to stand for control. Now, it stood for change. As the sun dipped low and music played from someone's porch speaker, we looked around and saw what Janet had never understood. This neighborhood didn't need more rules, it needed more kindness. And in the end, it wasn't her fire that burned Cedar Hollow down. It was the truth that set it free.